Welcome, welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Happy Friday. I hope everyone's having a great day and that you're grabbing something to eat as we get this webinar launched. Really appreciate you joining us today to hear about Oregon's district-run preschool survey findings. So as we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, and we will share the recording and slides after the webinar today. If you could just please put questions in the chat to be answered during the Q&A portion of the webinar, we'd really appreciate that. If you experience any technical issues, if you could just try to refresh your browser or contact Danielle Perry, who is our tech host in the chat today. And finally, we would love it if you could just introduce yourself in the chat, put your name, your organization, and location. We would just love to know who's joining us here today. And I know people are still coming in from the waiting room, so I'll give it a second, but we have a ton of content to cover today, so I want to make sure that we get to everything. All right. So once again, welcome, welcome. If you're just joining us, if you could please introduce yourself in the chat, put your name, organization, and location. We would just love it if we could know who's here today. And just want to let you know that we are recording today and the slides will be shared out afterwards. But I'd love to just get started so that we can go over all of our data and share with you Oregon's district-run preschool survey findings. So Celeste, if you could put it to the next slide, that would be great. All right, welcome again. I'm Marina Merrill. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of Research and Strategy here at the Children's Institute. I've been with Children's Institute for 11 years now, and I'm really excited to share our latest survey findings with you. I'm also very excited to introduce my colleague, Rashid Aziz. Rashid has been here with the Children's Institute for almost a year, but not quite, and he has been absolutely instrumental in getting this survey data analyzed and finalized for us today, and you'll hear more from him later today. So next slide, please. So for those of you who may not know Children's Institute's work, we've been working for over 20 years in the state of Oregon to ensure that Oregon is the best place to be a kid. We connect what we learn from research and what's happening in communities, schools, and health systems to shape smarter policies and stronger investments for early childhood. So in the past, we've advocated for proven programs and investments, including preschool, childcare, and home visiting, all to close opportunity gaps and give children the best start in life. And so today's conversation, we're going to be focusing on the key findings from our 2025 Preschool Landscape Survey and how we can use this data to better shape policy, practice, and strengthen early childhood education in Oregon. So today's agenda, we're going to cover starting with some context of the survey, going over why we decided to conduct it and what we hope to learn. And then we'll walk through some of the key findings, followed by big takeaways that emerge from the data. And next, we'll share some recommendations based on what we heard from districts and what the data tells us. And finally, we're going to leave some time for your questions and discussion at the end. And we'd love to kind of hear what you heard today and what you think are some key takeaways. All right, so next slide. So at Children's Institute, we believe that every child deserves the chance to be great by age 8. And that starts with a strong foundation in the earliest years, because we know from the research what happens before age 8 shapes everything that comes after. And decades of research has shown us that high quality preschool boosts school readiness, strengthens early learning and math skills, and helps close those gaps before they become entrenched. So, our work is guided by four key milestones on the path to helping kids be great by age 8. And today we're going to just be focusing on two. That is the access to quality early learning and strong transitions into kindergarten. So, we know that school districts play a critical role in both, making sure that families have access to preschool, as well as ensuring those smooth, supported transitions into kindergarten. And so that's why we really wanted to learn more about how schools are approaching these challenges and what's working to support kids and families in these district-run preschool programs, because they're an often overlooked entity in the early childhood landscape. All right, so slide 6, please. All right, so before we dive into our findings, I just wanted to share a little bit more about the purpose of this survey. So we focused the survey, like I said, on district-run preschools, in part because they're serving a significant number of Oregon's children to help fill these critical gaps in access to care. But we have very little statewide data known about them, especially if they're operating on their own funds outside of Preschool Promise and state funds and using private funds and federal funds to operate. So our goal was to better understand the scope of services that districts are offering and identify some opportunities as well as challenges, and highlight practices that support that access, that support quality and smooth transitions into kindergarten. We also wanted to capture some of the regional variation, as well as what program models are in play across the state and capacity constraints, because all of these insights are really essential for us in terms of planning and improvement. So ultimately, our hope is that this survey data will help inform local and state decisions on budgeting and continuous improvement efforts to strengthen preschool across Oregon. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so to set the stage a little bit, this is a really high level and quick look into a little bit of Oregon's history around our preschool landscape over the past decade. So back in 2015, Children's Institute conducted its first preschool landscape survey. And at that time, Oregon ranked in the bottom quartile nationally for access to quality early learning. And we found uneven access in that survey, including limited capacity, but yet a really strong interest on the part of districts to expand, especially if they could have access to stable funding streams. So the survey also highlighted that partnerships with Head Start, ESDs, and community providers were key to them providing preschool, but there was also a key need for coordinated planning, better data, and targeted supports. So then in 2016, Oregon launched Preschool Promise, the first state-funded mixed delivery program serving families up to 200% of the federal poverty level. And this was the first opportunity for school districts to draw down state funds to deliver preschool programming. And then in 2019, the Student Success Act was created. And there was an early learning account that dedicated 20% or roughly 531 million per biennium to early childhood, bolstering state dollars available for Oregon pre-kindergarten, early Head Start, Preschool Promise, as well as professional development for early childhood educators and other early learning initiatives. So this funding provided another expansion opportunity for Preschool Promise and districts to access those dollars. Another boost in access was in 2020 when Multnomah County voters also passed Preschool for All, so adding some more preschool slots. But despite all these efforts, demand is still exceeding supply, wait lists persist, and budget constraints have really slowed new investments in early learning. So that's why this year Children's Institute followed up with another survey on District 1 preschools to really understand what's changed, what's evolved, and what this means for Oregon's preschool system. And so, with that quick journey into Oregon's preschool history, I'm going to pass the mic over to Rasha to talk about our survey methods and sample.
Thank you, Marina. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. And I apologize if my throat gives out in the middle. I am fighting a cold right now. But to get started with this, the survey was administered online using SurveyMonkey. It was emailed directly to district leaders, superintendents, early learning coordinators, and other contacts that we had at different districts. Our partners at ODE supported our efforts, so we want to thank them for that as well. They really helped us get the survey out there. We did intentionally oversample likely preschool operators because we wanted to ensure we had enough responses from the group that is most relevant for these discussions. A $10 gift card incentive was also provided for completed surveys. So as you can see, the survey was organized into five short themed modules: availability and enrollment, program quality and design, early learning workforce, communication and outreach, and then funding and expansion. We really wanted to cover all of these different aspects of the system. And we tried to use plain language, brief definitions, and also an unsure or do not know option just to get in the most accurate information as possible. We did end up getting multiple responses, obviously, and we prioritized the most complete response of, of each survey. And when needed, some responses were prioritized from relevant key informants, such as a superintendent or an early learning director. In some cases, when we had multiple responses and all of them were complete and all of them were relevant, we averaged them out, and some of the open-ended comments at the end of questions were also recoded into the answers if they seemed to fit. Next, please. So we have this wonderful map made by our communications team. From In total, we received 63 complete surveys and we identified 49 unique school districts that currently offer preschool. Interestingly, 49 is the unique number of districts we had in 2015 as well. I'm not 100% sure if these are the same, but the number is the same. We also heard from six ESTs and eight districts that do not operate preschool. Those are not shown on this map. But since we didn't receive a large enough sample from either, they aren't included in the quantitative findings or in the slides that that you are going to see. Similarly, and yeah, non-operating districts are not included. Our final report will go into more detail on this, as well as some of the limitations we faced and some of the learnings we had after conducting this survey. And I'm going to hand it back to Marina to take you through the first part of our findings.
Thanks, Rashid. All right. So first up, we asked participants how long they've been operating preschool programs. And I think that the responses tell a pretty interesting story. So nearly 40% of the districts reported that they've been offering preschool for over 10 years. So that's strong long-term commitment to operating preschool in their districts. About a third provided preschool programs for 6 to 9 years, showing some steady growth. And then another 22% are newer programs. So they reported that they've only been providing preschool for 2 to 5 years, reflecting that more recent expansion. And just 6% are starting out in their first year. So the big takeaway here is that there's a wide range of program maturity across the districts that we surveyed, which really points to a need for some tailored strategies. So some opportunities to support those well-established programs while also having some strategies to help new initiatives get off the ground. All right, next slide, please. All right, and then we asked districts about how they're funding their preschool programs. And as you can see from this colorful data slide, really the big takeaway is that funding is really diverse and layered across the districts we surveyed. The most common source of funding reported is Preschool Promise. So about 60% of districts rely on it, making it a central funding stream for sustaining preschool programs in districts. No districts reported using local levies, and none reported plans to discontinue their preschool program in the coming year, which shows that even though many of them reported facing funding challenges, that they're still committed to serving their youngest learners. So overall, what we see here is that Oregon's preschool funding is really a mix of state dollars, federal dollars, some local resources, as well as a strong percentage of districts are have parent tuition supporting. So this complexity here in these funding strategy means that we need some flexible and sustainable strategies to support long-term growth. All right, so the next slide is looking at enrollment and scale. So when we look at program size, most of the district respondents operate on a very small scale. So the largest share of our districts reported having just one or two preschool classrooms, and a smaller number operate 3 to 5 classrooms, and only a handful have about 6 or more classrooms operating at the same time. Um, we had the largest programs was the smallest share, and those some reported that they had 10 or more classrooms. And those were concentrated in urban districts with higher student populations. But overall, these enrollment trends are just really confirming that preschool is really widespread, but still small scale statewide, and highlights the need for just supporting sustainability for those smaller programs while enabling some strategic expansion where demand and capacity can allow. All right, next slide, please. So one of the clearest themes from the survey is that the demand for preschool is exceeding the supply in many districts. Many districts face rising wait lists, and even modest wait lists amongst some districts are signaling some broader access challenges, especially in some underserved regions. So this just really continues to point to a growing unmet need for publicly funded preschool statewide. And then finally, I would just like to underscore that these districts tracking those waitlist trends over time is critical. So these numbers can really help both the local level district and at the state figure out future funding decisions and policy priorities so we can close those gaps and meet demand. All right, next slide, please. So we also asked districts their perception on their facilities, and most districts surveyed reported that they felt like they had adequate classroom and outdoor spaces, which is a shift. But there are still persistent quality and equity gaps reported in preschool environments. So, as I mentioned before, that many of the programs are small scale, and they reported that many of them are located within elementary schools, and spaces have originally been designed for older elementary students. So, district respondents emphasized and reported a real need for ongoing facility investments and creative space solutions to ensure that every child has a developmentally appropriate learning environment. Okay, next slide. All right, so here we looked at preschool partnerships. And most districts surveyed reported that they operate independently. But what we saw was a strong shift over the 2015 survey data that we collected in districts reporting collaborating with community partners. So the most frequently cited partners were Head Start, followed by ESDs and early learning hubs. And then districts also reported working with culturally specific organizations like Adelante Mujeres, Cairo, URCO, El Programa Hispano, and other organizations that are supporting high quality preschool program delivery and coaching, such as Teaching Preschool Partners and the Alliance for Equity in Montessori. So beyond program partnerships, districts also reported that they coordinate with local childcare providers, transportation and meal service providers. So Another trend that we saw was a big shift toward full day programming when compared to the 2015 survey data. And this shift really aligns with preschool promise standards and just reflects that districts are aligning better with state goals than they did in 2015. So slide 16, please. All right, so enrollment priorities. What we saw here is that most Oregon districts are prioritizing children from low-income families. They're also considering other factors when they prioritize children for their slots, including disability status, language needs, age of entry, so prioritizing 4-year-olds the year before they enter kindergarten, prioritizing kids within their district boundaries, and so ultimately, the enrollment priorities and shifts are just showing that we need to balance these statewide priorities with local flexibility so that every community still has opportunity to meet the state standards and its unique community needs. Okay, next slide, please. So, one really encouraging finding that we saw from the survey is that districts are reporting feeling really confident in their preschool curriculum when it comes to preparing kids for kindergarten. We also saw widespread and varied transition supports in place. So we saw things like open houses, home visits, um, and other strategies that were really intentional to support families and children feeling ready to transition into kindergarten. So ultimately, what we're seeing here is that districts are really prioritizing smooth transitions and that strong alignment between preschool and early elementary. All right, next slide, please. Um, so one area from the data that really stands out in terms is the need to support dual language learners. So we found some significant variation across districts in their support for dual language learners. And notably, 70% of districts reported that they haven't planned any new bilingual or multilingual initiatives since 2020. So this just is an area that I would point out that has some real room for growth considering our demographics in Oregon. So about 28% of children ages 0 to 5 are dual language learners, and even more are growing up in homes with language other than English being spoken. And so it really, we know that children that's multilingual children bring incredible strengths, but also can face barriers to accessing programs that meet their language needs. And so I'd say key takeaway here is that a very small number of districts are serving DLLs without seeing that corresponding growth in bilingual programming. Um, and it just points to perhaps Oregon's preschool system may not be keeping pace with children's language needs, but we would have to look at other settings and providers to really assess that more fully. All right, I'm going to transition over to Rasha now to talk about teacher qualifications and pathways.
Okay, so from the chart, we can see that most district-run preschool programs still rely most heavily on a bachelor's degree as the minimum qualification for lead teachers. Roughly 50% of districts set a BA as the baseline requirement. At the same time, a lot of districts are clearly using multiple qualification pathways to staff classrooms. Many accept associate's degrees, CDA credentials, or specific levels of the ORO as alternatives, or the Oregon Registry Online. On top of degree and credential requirements, roughly half of the districts did say they require a TSPC teaching license or an early childhood or early elementary endorsement. Some districts also noted that their qualification rules are determined by partners such as Head Start grantees or ESTs that operate or staff their preschool programs. And there is, as we can see, a lot of flexibility now. There are more pathways into these roles, but sometimes you need more consistency to create even qualification standards and expectations. Next. Now, taking a look at the compensation and incentives that are available, most districts still conform to existing salary schedules, classified, licensed, as well as some following K through 12 pay structures for pay parity. Other districts did note that they were using separate, more district-specific salary bands or aligning compensation with the ORO bands. Some also mentioned that compensation was tied to Head Start, Preschool Promise, or the ESTs that they work with, and the combination of local, federal, and grant dollars are utilized to provide some of the incentives mentioned here, which include tuition reimbursement, benefits packages, separate preschool pay structures. And so there are, the mix does suggest that there are preschool teachers that enjoy pay parity with K through 12. There is still inconsistent compensation, and I think the system as a whole would benefit from stability, equity, and a more clear process in terms of compensation. Next. So professional development is very varied, and a lot of districts are very clear about this, some stance about the needs of the of teachers in terms of what kinds of professional development they need. When we look at the graph, we see that those are student behavior, early literacy, socio-emotional learning, classroom management, curriculum implementation, as well as numeracy. There were a few others, and those will be included in the report as well. And it comes from many different directions. Districts themselves are the most common provider, but when we looked at who were the other providers, we had early learning hubs, ESTs, CCR&Rs, they all play a role. However, but when talking about profession development effectiveness, a lot of respondents did say that they were unsure about how effective their in-service professional development really was. And that led us to conclude that access is not enough. Even though we have a rich tapestry of available professional development opportunities, we need more consistent PD processes, more protected time, and feedback loops that encourage educators to get back to professional development providers about what's working and what's not. Next. When talking about K-12 alignment, again, a lot of districts now house preschool and elementary schools, and that gives rise to a lot of opportunities for alignment, such as joint training, literacy nights, annual student planning meetings, and kindergarten classroom visits. This really helps them bring preschool into the same planning and accountability conversations as the rest of the system. In cases where alignment is stronger, it does show up as some of the opportunities you see in the graph, such as joint training and shared planning time. Despite, however, growing alignment, and there is a shift towards aligning preschool with K through 12, most challenges do remain practical and structural in nature, limited time, mismatched schedules, and practical space issues where in cases where preschool is in a separate building. Next. So, family engagement repeatedly showed up as a cornerstone of preschool success, and we're going to continue talking about it in the next few slides as well. And once children are in preschool, parent-teacher conferences and family nights, as you can see from the graph, are nearly universal. Many districts are also using home visits, parent education, weekly play groups, and classroom events as well. The relationship-based side of engagement is pretty strong once families actually have access to a program or are aware of it. There are, however, a lot of challenges as well. There are time constraints, excessive transportation issues, limited awareness, and then obviously there are areas where district preschool offerings are lacking. It was good. It was surprisingly positive to see that only a very small share pointed to language as a primary barrier. And however, this entire conversation tells us that family engagement continues to be a very important success factor, and there needs to be a continued focus on equity-focused channels to ensure information reaches families that are currently part of the system, but also those who have not yet, who are not yet participating. Next. So looking again at what mediums and what methods are most effective, we can see when it comes to effective engagement, word of mouth consistently comes out on top, followed by community partnerships, social media, and text-based campaigns. Direct phone calls and paid advertisements are not as effective as the rest. And from the questions that we had, families respond when they receive more personalized communications, when they have more agency in the entire process. And this we hope that this gives districts a clearer roadmap on which channels they need to rely on, which channels are perhaps not as effective and could be phased out as well. Next. So, unfortunately, and I'm sure as you all are aware, funding continues to be one of the biggest barriers to access and growth. We've already seen that there's a clear unmet demand for preschool. The existing system is reliant on a limited funding stream that is relatively inflexible and very sensitive to state and federal circumstances. Right now, most districts rely on state and federal funding for 75% or more of their entire budget, and sustainable funding streams are really needed for a lot of districts to continue maintaining their services, not just expansion, but simply maintaining as well. And the main barriers still remain structural and financial, not a lack of vision or capacity or indeed demand from families. Next. So these are two more graphs that show you that, again, when it comes to sustainability and expansion, there is a consistent lack of funding. Space shows up right alongside it as a top constraint, and this means that districts are confronting operating costs as well as capital and facility challenges. So families are interested, waitlists are constantly growing. It's just that districts just don't have the dollars or the physical space to grow. But despite all of these challenges, and in another question not shown here, nearly 80% of the districts did say that they were confident they could scale up preschool services if adequate funding was available. So that's really encouraging and heartening to hear as well. Next, please. So finally, we come to some of the success factors for preschool. Earlier, we discussed family engagement as well, and obviously, funding is a key part of it. But some other factors that showed up were districts need strong school leaders who prioritize preschool, protect it in the budget, as well as effective partnerships that help them secure space, staffing, transportation, and a lot of wraparound services that individual districts might not be able to provide alone. Consistent teacher recruitment and a strong PD framework are essential. And then again, family engagement that is inclusive and helps children and families connect with their preschool and others are critical. And there is a wide range of factors that's identified here. And I will now hand it back to Marina to close us out.
Thank you so much. Um, yeah, so just wrapping up some key takeaways. We just some big themes from the survey, as you heard over and over again. Access remains uneven. Funding and space are the dominant constraints of both expansion and sustainability, and demand continues to exceed supply. Um, what we've seen is that workforce pathways have become more flexible, which is really encouraging. However, the supports for quality and alignment are varying widely across districts, and professional development is still inconsistent. Districts are working very hard to expand access and even sustain the classrooms that they do have, adding classrooms, building partnerships, and engaging families are all critical components of their success. And the two strongest factors that they reported, as Rashid recently just mentioned, was a need for strong leadership around this and community collaboration. So what this data really underscored for me, especially when like zooming out and thinking about the findings from our 2015 data, is that preschool promise is really important for school districts, and state programs and policies really make a big difference. And many districts are feeling ready to scale if that funding comes available. But we also heard, that there's this feeling of the current budget constraints and realities that we're facing right now, potentially threatening their programs and also slowing progress. Um, we're also seeing some persistent equity gaps, especially for dual language learners, as I mentioned, with nearly 28% of Oregon's young children growing up in multilingual homes, and we're not seeing that same growth in bilingual programming. So that's something to for us to consider, I think, as we move forward and building out those bilingual educator pathways. And finally, just most programs are still small scale, and and even in some districts, they're ready, to put preschools across all their elementary schools. Um, we still aren't seeing that funding. And often, one of the things that elementary schools were reporting was that limited developmentally appropriate space, both in classroom as well as their outside facilities and playgrounds. So just continuing to underscore that need for facility investment and infrastructure investment alongside preschool slots. Um, and then finally, while districts reported feeling really confident about their curricula and offering transition supports, these efforts really do need consistent and ongoing supports to sustain. All right, next slide. All right, so we're at policy recommendations. So just taking this all together. Um, these findings really are pointing for a clear opportunity for more targeted investments. Um, District-run preschool looks very different from community-based care, and that matters for how we design supports for them. And these programs are operating within their K-12 structures, which impacts their staffing, their compensation, their scheduling, and policy strategies and support need to reflect their strengths and that reality. And I just want to be really clear that we believe that high quality early learning can happen in any setting, whether it's a school-based program, a community provider, or a family child care setting. And I really do believe that one of Oregon's greatest strengths is that we've invested in and really sustained a truly mixed delivery model. And that diversity, I think, really matters, especially in our state and to support parent choice. But whether a program is located in a school building or a community center, I think it's important that we think about ensuring that every setting meets the developmental needs of young children and aligns with the structure of that program in that program context so that we set all providers and all kids up for success. Another key area that we talked about was just professional development is another key policy area. So I know we've placed a lot of investments in this recently, but many district teachers are still, and the respondents are reporting that their access to PD is inconsistent. And many district teachers are coming from elementary backgrounds and do require more specialized training in early childhood development, positive behavior supports, support in supporting inclusive classrooms, and family engagement. And PD should really be job embedded, practice specific, and aligned with our early learning standards. And I feel the data really points to K-12 folks needing some more support around that. Um, Likewise, leadership capacity came up, and that also matters a lot. Principals and district leaders need early learning expertise to supervise and support their preschool classrooms effectively. And I think this is a great place where state investments could include some leadership training focused on that support and leadership around P5 settings. So funding models also really need to consider these district constraints. As we heard from our districts are facing those capital challenges to support facilities expansion and operation and make their facilities more developmentally appropriate. Um, and their operating costs are tied to their license salary scheduled. So policies could be in place to help stabilize those operating funds. And we can ideally move towards lessening the reliance on local wealth and parent tuition. So finally, I think all this is just really pointing to districts expressing a need for flexibility, yet with accountability. So they didn't ask for the accountability, but I think we have some room to design some more transition supports and help districts in their outreach strategies to tailor that better to fit their local context, as well as meeting state equity goals and continue to support districts in their family engagement activities and co-designing their strategies with families so that districts are able to really meet the needs of their community and support culturally responsive practices along the way. All right. I don't know, Rashid, if there's anything else that you want to add to key takeaways or policy recs before we transition over to our Q&A.
No, thank you so much, Marina. I just wanted to share that there is a lot more nuance and insight that we haven't shared yet because, obviously we have a limited time and we still do appreciate all of you for showing up. But we will be sharing our final report in a couple of weeks, and that will provide a lot more context into a lot of these things that we've covered.
Great, thank you. All right, can we transition to our final slide, our next slide, and then, oh, Celeste, there's the thank you slide, and then we'll do
Did
the
did
Q&A.
it kick off?
I think it did, yeah.
Oh, whoops. Okay, sorry, folks. We're going to transition into a Q&A next, but I want to make sure that everyone gets Rashid and Marina's information before we move into that. So bear with me here.
It's okay. We could also do that at the very end too, since we have plenty of time.
Well, it's back, so can you if you can see it. There you go.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I just want to thank you all first and foremost for joining us today. And I really want to extend a special thank you to all of the districts that are here. I see some of you that filled out our survey. I know it was a long one and your time is valuable and precious, but this data is super interesting and I think really invaluable. So want to thank you for your time. And I also want to thank Danielle Perry, who is our outstanding tech support today, and the countless ways in which she supported our data collection and supported all the behind the scenes things to make this possible, as well as Aditi Sharma and Celeste Yeager Candle. You made our slides look so beautiful and accessible, and we really couldn't have done this without you. And as Rashid said, we're really excited to continue this conversation and engage with you. So let's get to the Q&A and also, we'd just love to hear what your takeaways are today.
Okay, we're gonna move into the Q&A. I'm Celeste. I'm the comms manager at Children's Institute. I'm actually gonna just start with some of the things that came up in the chat. So I'll go through those. Looks like Rashid and Marina did provide some response in there, but just in case you're not monitoring the chat. And then we'll open it up to folks if you would like to ask questions, and I'd be happy to go back to slides and things like that if there were some specifics. That you were thinking of that line up with some of the slides in here. So let me just get back. We had some folks just asking about what full day meant. And so Marina said that full day is mirroring the elementary school day, so about 6 or 7 hours. And Rashid had said that days per week was a question that was asked in the survey. And so there's going to be also some more detail about that once we get the full report out. Did either of you want to add something additional to those questions?
Yeah, Rashid, I can't remember specifically if we more fully defined it, but the state doesn't have an official um, definition of full day for school district, preschool run school districts, but most districts are considering a full day as mapped to their school day, and that's how we kind of set it up in the um, survey.
Yeah, and just to add on top of that, all the districts that responded to us fell into either the 4 or 5 days per week category. And there were some districts that offered half days, some sessions, 6 hour sessions, and those fell into the other category. So that will also be included in our report.
Thank you. We had another question from Rod. Do we know how many of these districts are in areas that do not have preschool promise or Head Start services in their district service area? We have 8 districts in our hub region that are operating preschool because there are no other options for families. So it looks like we don't have that analysis, but would be something that we could look into further. Um, and so anything either of you want to add about that, or maybe have any ideas where folks might find information about that?
We do have the Elmo data system that can look at mapping that, and that is something that we could look at. We didn't ask districts directly or specifically about what other preschools are being run or operated and if they've done, a full assessment of need in their area based on what other providers are in this space. And I think that you point to a real miss and that that's something that we could add in a future survey. I love that idea.
From Christy, how did the sites with preschool for all, Multnomah County specific, show up in this funding sources section? Rashid says we did not have a separate category for Multnomah County Preschool for All, but had some responses included in the other category, which will be further fleshed out in the report. Rashid, do you want to elaborate on that any further?
No, I think that's pretty much what I can recall right now, Celeste. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Okay, great. And yes, we will be again time limitations. Wanted to make sure everyone got kind of the key findings and takeaways, and then for all of you data people, we'll have some of the details out in our full report. Um, I'm scrolling. I think there's some more things coming in. Oh, Christy, the full report I think will be out by the end of this month. Does that sound right, team?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So Christy will, if you're on our email list, which I'm sure you are, and you will be probably after today, then we will send that report out to everyone that came to this webinar once it's
And it'll
available.
probably be posted on our website too,
Yes.
right? So yeah, people can look for it there. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
Oh, yes. And again, just I'm happy to hop back to any of the slides if folks had some additional questions or just wanted to revisit those.
Yeah, and they will be shared. So please feel free to get in touch with myself or Marina if you think of something later on.
I see a hand raised. Andy Bales
Yeah.
Molnar. Go for it.
Hey, I hope it's okay. I started to type
Yeah.
it in and then
Yeah.
I'm like, now I'm just trying desperately to type fast. I was interested and curious in the finding there about professional development being inconsistent. And I'm wondering if you have any other layers around that, like inconsistent in terms of inconsistency of what's delivered to early learning teachers and then to like the same kindergarten, first grade teachers in the same school district or inconsistent between regions. I'm just wondering if you have any other insights around that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Thanks.
that's a great question. So the inconsistencies were mostly across the variation that we heard from districts of whether they're getting access to professional learning through their ESD or through the CCR&R or what structures they're able to access for their professional learning. So that's one layer of the inconsistency. And then another layer of the inconsistency is just how it's being delivered. So to your point, it's like, some districts are reporting that it's all within house and they're not, accessing the variety of supports that are out there. The other thing would be in content, that what we're basically seeing by and large is that the professional learning is not holistic or tailored to the level of context or teacher qualification or time, and that it's also just a wide variety of things. So some of it's only behavior related, and districts are saying that they could use supports in literacy and numeracy and other areas of professional learning, but it seems that like positive behavior supports and things has kind of prevailed. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and the report will kind of dig into that a little bit more. Any other follow-up questions or comments? Rod has his hand raised.
Ah,
Hi, Rod.
There we go. Trying to get on camera since I was going to ask a question. Something I would just um, encourage Children's Institute to keep at the forefront is our little rural areas of Oregon. We've really been advocating at the DELC level for someday having preschool promise funding in remote areas by classroom versus by slot. Um, because as I put in the chat, we have some school districts that never applied for preschool promise because one year they might have five preschoolers and the next year they might have none. And so it was that fear of not keeping slots filled. Um, so yeah, keep that on your radar. We have to find a way to fund our little isolated and remote school districts because they are really stepping up and trying to provide what these families need without the funding.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that's something that we can, I think it's important to put into the final recommendations is, we talk kind of globally or high level about like these small scale preschools, but, diving in a little bit deeper about what that means for smaller remote. And you can see from the map that we shared, you're right. There's just like whole swaths of Oregon that didn't respond to the survey at least, but that really maps also with the array of services that we know to be true and lacking in those areas as well. All right. Any other comments or questions? Really appreciate it. Oh, Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure this group knows and Children Institute knows that there is no longer any Head Start operating within Grant County or Wallowa County. And this has caused, at least in County, is causing major challenges trying to support all the kiddos that need the services. So as it stands now, the district has stepped up and through K-12 funds have really been supplementing funds at the preschool level and really Head Start level. So I just want to make sure and keep that out there because it's a problem. That funding, we had 18 slots in Grant County. I know that's not many, but it was certainly critical for the kiddos that we serve here.
Right.
Don't know exactly how many Wallowa had. I think I heard 18 too. And man, this needs to be readdressed one way or another.
Yeah, thank you for that. It certainly felt like looking at the data from this survey to 2015 that we saw some growth in some newer programs and some, you know, areas that are dropping off. So it's like we're almost constantly playing whack-a-mole across the state and getting coverage, as you're mentioning. Any other questions, comments, reflections, things you want us to consider, things you're interested in us studying next? More survey.
I see Rod's hand again. Rod.
Just to follow up to what Mark was saying, Mark, I know you by name, but have never met you. But Wallowa County, yes, they lost 18 Head Start slots. Uh, and I just want to give a shout out to Wallowa ESD. They stepped up and they're now operating 5 preschool classrooms in that county in conjunction with each school district. And they're doing that they have 24 preschool promise slots. That's the funding they have, but they're serving about 70 kids. And we see that a lot in our region. Our preschool promise providers aren't serving the number of kids that they have slots for. They're serving more kids um, than they have slots for. They're so many of our preschool promise providers are stretching that dollar as far as they can stretch it.
Absolutely. Sorry, it looks like.
I have a couple. Oh, sorry,
Go
Maria.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I have a couple comments here, and from like a perspective of maybe for us for CI to think about, but teasing out what it looks like in urban and rural areas and breaking that data down to show those differences. Um, because even within those rural areas, breaking it down by those with preschool for all versus that don't have it. So consideration for that. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. All right. Any other comments, questions? This was a great conversation. Really appreciate all your contributions. And we look forward to evolving this and sharing with you the report. And I think we can incorporate some of these suggestions into the final report. So thank you. And I think if there aren't any other questions or comments, we can end a little bit early and give you a few more minutes of time back.